My son sued me, taking my $18 million house and custody of my grandchildren. You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old woman, he laughed before the judge. Desolate, I moved to my late husband's farmhouse. While cleaning, I found a safe hidden behind the stove. The combination was my birth date. Inside was a letter that began, "If you're reading this, it's time for the truth. But let me tell you from the beginning how I got to this moment that changed everything forever. My name is Judith. I am 67 years old, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had a family that loved me. My husband Joseph died 2 years ago from a heart attack, leaving me a mansion valued at $18 million and several prosperous businesses. I thought my son Mark, a successful 42-year-old lawyer, would be my support in my old age. How terribly wrong I was. It all started when Mark arrived home with Vanessa, his wife, and the 8-year-old twins, Leo and Sophie. I was living happily with my grandchildren, caring for them while their parents worked, cooking their favorite meals, taking them to the park. "Mom, we need to talk," Mark told me that October afternoon, with a seriousness that sent a chill down my spine. Vanessa was by his side, wearing that red dress that always seemed too bold for her, with an expression I couldn't decipher. "What is it, son? Is something wrong?" I asked, pouring coffee in my favorite sunroom, the one where Joseph and I had spent so many afternoons talking about our dreams. "We've been watching you, Mom. Lately, you've been acting very strangely. You forget things. You repeat conversations. You leave the gas on." I froze. It was true that sometimes I forgot where I left my keys, or I'd repeat a story, but that happens to anyone my age. It didn't mean I was crazy. "Mark, they're just normal little memory lapses. Your father had them at my age too," I replied, trying to stay calm. But Vanessa leaned forward, with those calculating eyes that always made me nervous. "Judith, yesterday you gave the children ice cream for breakfast. The day before, you forgot to pick them up from school. The principal had to call us. That wasn't true. I would never forget my grandchildren. But before I could defend myself, Mark dropped the bomb that would destroy my world. "Mom, we've consulted with several doctors. We believe you have the early stages of Alzheimer's. This house is too big for you, and the children, well, they can't be in danger." The words hit me like daggers. Alzheimer's? Danger? What was my own son talking about? "I don't understand, Mark. I feel perfectly fine. I've taken care of the children since they were born. I would never harm them." Vanessa and Mark exchanged a look that broke my soul. It was the look of two people who had already made a decision without consulting me. "That's why we've decided it's best for you to move into a specialized care facility. We'll sell the house to pay for your care, and the children will stay with us permanently." My world came crashing down. My house, the one Joseph and I built with so much love, the one that held 40 years of memories. Sell it and be separated from Leo and Sophie forever? No. "Mark, this is my house, and those are my grandchildren too. I'm not going anywhere." But my son was no longer the loving child I raised. His eyes hardened in a way that scared me. "Mom, you can either cooperate, or we can do this the legal way. You decide." That threat was the beginning of the end. In the following weeks, Mark hired doctors who confirmed his false diagnosis, presented testimony from neighbors who supposedly saw me behaving strangely, and took everything from me. The day of the trial was the most humiliating day of my life. Sitting in that cold room, listening to my own son describe me as a demented and dangerous old woman, I felt my heart shatter into pieces. The day of the competency hearing arrived like a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. I sat in that cold courtroom, watching my own son destroy my reputation, word by word. Mark had worn his best black suit, the one I'd given him for his birthday last year. The irony. Vanessa was in the gallery, wearing a gold dress that shimmered under the fluorescent lights, as if this were a celebration instead of my own living funeral. "Your Honor," Mark began with that professional voice that used to make me so proud, "my mother, Judith, is showing clear signs of advanced cognitive decline. She can no longer live alone in that $18 million mansion without posing a danger to herself and to my children." Tears began to roll down my cheeks. How could he be saying these things about me? I, who had raised him after Joseph worked 18-hour days to build our empire. I, who had stayed up all night nursing his fevers, who had sold my jewelry to pay for his university education. I present to this court the testimony of Dr. Miller, a specialist neurologist who evaluated my mother last week. An older man rose from the stand. I had never even met him, yet there he was, deciding my future with words I never thought I'd hear about myself. After a thorough evaluation, the doctor said in a monotone voice, "Mrs. Herrera presents symptoms consistent with early-onset dementia, frequent memory loss, temporal disorientation, and episodes of confusion that could jeopardize her safety and that of any minors under her care." "That's a lie," I shouted, jumping up from my seat. "I've never been with that doctor in my life." The judge banged his gavel. "Ma'am, maintain your composure, or I will have to ask you to leave the courtroom." My lawyer, an inexperienced young man who had cost me $5,000 because I had no more money after Mark froze my accounts, gently took my arm. "Mrs. Herrera, please, sit down. This isn't helping you." But how could I stay calm while listening to lie after lie? Mark continued presenting evidence of my supposed dementia. Testimonies from neighbors who claimed they'd seen me talking to myself in the garden. The truth was, I talked to Joseph, visiting his memory while I watered the flowers he had loved so much. "Your Honor," Mark said, pulling out a thick folder, "I also present photographs of my mother's house. As you can see, there are clear signs of neglect and disorder that confirm her inability to maintain a safe home. The photographs were passed from hand to hand. I recognized my kitchen, but it looked dirty, messy, as if someone had deliberately trashed it. My living room was filled with stacks of old newspapers. My bedroom had clothes thrown everywhere. "Those photos are doctored," I whispered to my lawyer. "My house never looks like that." But no one was listening. Mark had orchestrated everything perfectly. Then came the worst part. Mark approached the stand, and with fake tears in his eyes that turned my stomach, began his final performance. "Your Honor, it pains me deeply to be here today. I love my mother, but my children, Leo and Sophie, deserve to grow up in a safe environment. Last month, my mother forgot to pick them up from school. They were found alone at 7 o'clock in the evening, crying because they thought we had abandoned them." "Liar!" I screamed again. "I would never do that to my grandchildren." But Mark continued his act. "Last week, she gave them adult medication, thinking they were vitamins. We had to take them to the hospital to have their stomachs pumped. Every word was like a knife in my chest. My own son, inventing terrible stories about me to get his hands on my inheritance. Vanessa also testified with that sweet, false voice she used at family gatherings. Judith has always been a wonderful mother-in-law, but lately she's very changed. Yesterday she asked me the same question 5 times. The day before, she didn't recognize the children for a moment. It's so sad to see her like this. Lies, all lies, but the judge believed them. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he nodded as he listened to each fabricated testimony. When it was my turn to speak, I stood with all the dignity I had left. "Your Honor, I raised that man sitting over there. I worked alongside my husband for 40 years to build everything we have. I have never endangered my grandchildren. I love them more than my own life." My voice broke as I saw Leo and Sophie's little faces in the gallery, not understanding why Grandma was crying in this strange place full of serious people. Mark was my pride and joy. I sent him to the best university, paid for his law degree, supported him when he started his own firm, and this is how he repays me. By inventing illnesses, I don't have to take what my husband and I built with so much sacrifice. But my words sounded like the ramblings of a desperate old woman. Mark had planted the seed of doubt, and now everything I said seemed to confirm his version of events. The judge deliberated for just 20 minutes. 20 minutes to destroy an entire life. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he said in a solemn voice, "This court finds that Mrs. Herrera is not in a condition to manage her assets nor to maintain custody of minors." The gavel fell like a lightning bolt. Legal guardianship and administration of assets are granted to Mr. Fences, Mark, and permanent custody of the minors, Leo and Sophie, is his responsibility. The world stopped. Mark stood up in triumph, hugging Vanessa as if they had won the lottery. because that's exactly what they had done. They had won $18 million with lies. I rushed to my grandchildren before they could be taken from me forever. "Grandma loves you so much," I whispered, hugging them desperately. But Mark pushed me away abruptly. "Get away from my children. You've done enough damage." And then came the phrase that would haunt my nightmares. "You'll never see the kids again, you crazy old woman," he said with a laugh, just low enough for only me to hear, but with a cruelty I will never forget. I walked out of that courthouse completely destroyed. Without a home, without grandchildren, without family, without anything. I walked out of that courthouse like a ghost. My legs trembled so much I could barely walk. People looked at me with pity as I dragged my feet through the cold hallways that had witnessed my public humiliation. Mark and Vanessa came out behind me, he with a satisfied smirk that turned my stomach. She was carrying Sophie in her arms, while Leo walked hand in hand with his father, my grandchildren. The babies I had helped raise, who knew my lullabies by heart, who ran into my arms every time they saw me. "Bye, Grandma," Leo shouted, trying to pull his hand free from Mark's to run to me, but his father held him tight. "She's not your grandma anymore, son. Remember what we told you. The lady is very sick and can't take care of you anymore." Tears completely blinded me. "Mark, please. They're my grandchildren too. Don't do this to me." But he kept walking as if I were invisible. Vanessa shot me one last look, and for a second, I saw something in her eyes that chilled my blood. It wasn't sadness or compassion. It was pure triumph, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years. My lawyer approached with a defeated look. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Herrera. We did what we could, but the evidence against you was overwhelming." "Evidence? It was all lies." Mark made up every word. "I know, but legally we couldn't prove it. Mark is a very skilled lawyer. He prepared this case for months, maybe years." Those words hit me like a hammer. Years. Did that mean my son had been planning to rob me for much longer than I imagined? The next few days were hell. I had 1 week to get my things out of the mansion that had been my home for 40 years. 1 week to pack a lifetime into boxes. Mark didn't speak a word to me during the whole process. He hired a moving company to pack my belongings as if I were a stranger. I walked through those halls full of memories, touching the walls where Joseph and I had hung pictures of our family, where we had marked Mark's height as a child. "Ma'am," the moving supervisor said to me, "what should we do with these antique pieces in the basement?" I went down to see what he was talking about. In a dusty corner were the first pieces of furniture Joseph and I bought when we were newlyweds. A wooden table he had repaired with his own hands. The chairs we had painted yellow together one Sunday afternoon. "Leave them," I told them, my voice breaking. "I have no room for memories anymore." But Mark appeared behind me with that coldness that was now so familiar. "Take it all. I don't want anything of hers in my house." His house? It was my house. The house Joseph and I built brick by brick. The house where he was born, where he took his first steps, where we celebrated every one of his birthdays. "Mark, please, just let me keep a few pictures from when you were a child, some memories of your father." He looked at me as if I were an annoying insect. "I already told you, I don't want anything of yours here. This house needs a deep cleaning after years of neglect." Neglect? I had kept that house immaculate for decades. Every corner sparkled. Every garden was perfectly manicured. But now Mark was describing it as if it had been a dump. Vanessa appeared on the basement stairs, wearing tight jeans and a pink blouse that seemed too young for her 35 years. "Honey, the decorators are here. They want to start on the main living room remodel." Remodel? It hadn't even been 3 days since they got the house, and they already wanted to erase every trace of my existence. "Wait," I begged. "At least let me say goodbye to the grandchildren." I haven't been able to explain what's happening. Mark laughed with a cruelty I had never known in him. "Explain what? That their grandmother is crazy? We already explained it to them. The children understand that you need specialized medical help. I'm not crazy, and you know it. The doctors say otherwise, Mom. And now, please, finish packing and leave. The children get scared when you get hysterical." Hysterical. That word hurt more than all the lies in court. I, who had always been a calm, thoughtful woman, who had solved every family problem with patience and love, was now hysterical for defending my home and my grandchildren. That night, I slept in a cheap motel near the airport. I had nowhere to go. Mark had frozen all my accounts for my own good, according to the judge. I only had the cash I kept in my purse for emergencies. I sat on that hard, cold bed, surrounded by boxes of the few personal items I could salvage, and I cried as I hadn't cried since Joseph's death. But these weren't tears of grief for a natural loss. They were tears of betrayal, of disbelief, of a wound I knew would never fully heal. The next day, I remembered the farmhouse. Joseph had bought the property 20 years ago when we dreamed of retiring to the country. It was 2 hours from the city, on a 5-hectare plot surrounded by mountains. We had only gone a few times because we were always busy with the businesses, but Joseph kept it because he said one day it would be our refuge. Maybe Mark doesn't know it exists, I thought with a thread of hope. I hired a taxi that cost me $200, money I couldn't afford to spend, but I had no other choice. The driver looked at me curiously as he loaded my boxes into the car. "Moving to the country, ma'am?" "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain my tragedy to a stranger. The drive was silent. I watched out the window as the city receded, taking with it everything that had been my life until that moment. The skyscrapers gave way to small houses, then open fields, and finally the mountains that surrounded Joseph's farmhouse. When we arrived, my heart sank. The property looked abandoned, as if no one had set foot there in years. The main house was small compared to the mansion, but it had a rustic charm that Joseph had adored. The wooden walls were faded, the windows were fogged, and the garden was completely overgrown with weeds. "Are you sure you want to stay here, ma'am?" the driver asked, seeing my crestfallen face. "Yes, I'll be fine here," I lied, paying him and watching him drive away down the dusty path. I was left alone in the middle of that absolute solitude. The silence was deafening after so many years of city life. All I could hear was the wind in the trees and the distant song of a few birds. I opened the main door with the key Joseph kept under a broken flower pot. The inside smelled of dampness and neglect. Furniture covered in white sheets looked like ghosts in the dim light. Everything was coated in a layer of dust so thick that my footsteps left prints on the floor. The first night was terrible. There was no electricity. The water ran brown from the pipes, and every sound startled me. I lay down on an old mattress I found in the main bedroom, hugging the only photo I had managed to save of Joseph and me on our wedding day. What would he have done in my place? I wondered, feeling his absence like a physical pain. The next few days, I dedicated myself to cleaning. It was the only thing I could do to keep from going truly mad with my thoughts. Cleaning gave me a purpose. It made me feel useful when my entire world had lost its meaning. It was on the 5th day, while I was scrubbing the kitchen, that my life changed forever. It was on the 5th day, as I was scrubbing the kitchen with all the strength I had left, that something changed forever. I had been cleaning since dawn, trying to keep my mind busy so I wouldn't think about Leo and Sophie. I wondered if they missed me, if Mark had told them I had died, if they would one day understand the truth of what had happened. The kitchen was small but cozy, with wooden cabinets that Joseph had installed with his own hands. I remembered when we used to come on weekends and he would insist on cooking for me. Making those huge breakfasts, he said, would give me energy to hike in the mountains. I was cleaning behind the old stove when I noticed something odd. The stove seemed to have shifted slightly from its original position. There were marks on the floor showing where it used to be, and now it was a few inches to the right. How strange, I thought. Joseph was always so meticulous about everything. I tried to move the stove to clean better behind it, but it was too heavy for me. I found a broom and used it as a lever, pushing little by little until I managed to move it aside. And that's when I saw it. There, embedded in the brick wall, was a small but sturdy safe. The metal gleamed as if it had been recently installed, a stark contrast to the aging kitchen walls. My heart began to pound so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Why would Joseph install a safe in secret? What could he have kept in there that he hadn't told me about? The safe had a modern digital keypad, completely out of place in this rustic kitchen. It looked like one of those that opens with a 6-digit numerical combination. I stood in front of it for several minutes, trying to process what I had found. Joseph and I never kept secrets. We shared everything, bank accounts, important documents, business decisions. Why would he hide this from me? Maybe he was going to tell me and died before he could, I thought, feeling guilty for doubting him. But curiosity was stronger than anything else. I needed to know what was inside. I started by trying obvious combinations. First, our wedding date, 061582. Nothing. Then I tried his birth date, 122353. That didn't work either. I tried Mark's birthday, 081181. The panel flashed red, indicating an error. I sat on an old chair in the kitchen, staring at the safe as if it were an unsolvable riddle. What combination would Joseph have chosen? He was a man of routines, of numbers that held special meaning for him. Then I remembered something he had told me many times during our marriage. Judith, you are the most important thing in my life. The day you were born was the day the universe decided to bless me. With trembling hands, I entered my birth date, 031557. The panel flashed green, and I heard a metallic click that echoed through the silent kitchen. The door swung open slowly, revealing the contents of the safe. Inside were several folded documents, a small voice recorder, and what appeared to be a thick manila envelope. The first thing I picked up was a letter with my name written in Joseph's unmistakable handwriting. My hands shook so much, I almost dropped it as I unfolded it. My dearest Judith, it began, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you and something terrible has happened. If it is time for the truth, it is because Mark has finally shown his true colors. I sat down abruptly. Mark showed his true colors? What did that mean? Joseph had died 2 years before Mark sued me. How could he have predicted what would happen? I continued reading, my heart racing. For the last 5 years of my life, I discovered things about our son that broke my heart. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy the image you had of him. But now that I'm not here to protect you, you need to know the truth. The truth about what? Mark had been an exemplary son, a bit distant in recent years, but always respectful, always successful. Judith, Mark is not our biological son. The letters blurred before my eyes. I read the sentence once, twice, 3 times, but the words made no sense. How could Mark not be our son? I had carried him. I had been in the delivery room. I had felt every contraction, every pain. I know this will shock you as much as it shocked me when I found out. Mark is Vanessa's son by another man. Vanessa was pregnant when she met Mark, but he never knew. She made him believe the baby was his. My world tilted. Vanessa had met Mark 10 years ago, long after Mark was born. How could she be his mother? But then I understood. The Mark in the letter wasn't my Mark. It was another Mark, a man Vanessa had deceived years ago, making him believe he was the father of a child that wasn't his. I continued reading desperately. I discovered this by chance 5 years ago, when I hired a private investigator to check on Vanessa's background before our son married her. What I found left me cold. Joseph had investigated Vanessa. That explained why he never fully accepted her into the family, though he was always polite to her. Vanessa has a history of failed marriages, always for money. Her first husband was an older, wealthy, but sickly businessman. He died under suspicious circumstances 2 years after they married. He left her a considerable inheritance that she squandered in less than a year. My hands trembled so much I had to put the letter down on the table to continue reading. Her second husband was Mark Hernandez, a young, successful lawyer, much like our Mark. Vanessa got pregnant immediately after marrying him, but the investigator discovered she had been having an affair with another man for 7 months. When Mark Hernandez demanded a paternity test, Vanessa disappeared with the baby. My breathing quickened. Vanessa had fled with a baby that wasn't her husband's, a baby that, Judith. That baby is who we now know as our grandchildren. Vanessa changed her last name and the child's, moved to another city, and started over. When she met our Mark, she invented a story about being a widowed single mother. It couldn't be true. Leo and Sophie, my beloved grandchildren, weren't really my grandchildren? But the letter continued. Our Mark fell head over heels for her and adopted the child as his own. He never knew that Vanessa had specifically chosen him because he had the same name and profession as the child's real father. Tears began to fall on the paper, smudging the ink. It was all starting to make sense. The way Vanessa always seemed to be calculating something, how she had insisted that Mark legally adopt the child, how she always looked at me with that strange expression. But the worst part, my love, is what I discovered later. But the worst of it, my love, is what I discovered later. My hands trembled as I turned to the next page of the letter. Joseph had discovered something even worse than all the rest. I braced myself for the next blow, though I wasn't sure my heart could take any more revelations. Vanessa not only deceived Mark about the child's paternity, she has also been poisoning him against you from the moment they got married. I have found evidence that she has been planning to get her hands on our fortune for years. Poisoning him against me? I remembered all the small changes in Mark I had noticed, but had chalked up to the stress of marriage and fatherhood. How he had started to question my decisions, to suggest I was aging poorly, to hint that maybe I needed help. I found recordings of conversations between Vanessa and a friend of hers, where they planned step by step how to get Mark to declare you mentally incompetent. Vanessa knows corrupt doctors who are willing to sign any diagnosis for money. The air left my lungs. Vanessa had orchestrated everything from the beginning. Every doctor who testified against me, every false testimony, every fabricated piece of evidence. I also discovered that Vanessa has been subtly drugging you during family dinners for the last 2 years. Small doses of medication that cause temporary confusion and memory loss. That's why you sometimes felt disoriented after visiting them. I remembered those evenings at Mark's house, when I'd feel strangely dizzy after dinner, when Vanessa would insist I have a second cup of coffee for digestion. How I would sometimes forget where I put my car keys when leaving their house, or repeat a story without realizing it. Vanessa documented every one of these episodes that she herself caused, recorded videos of you acting confused, took photos of you when you looked disoriented, all to build her case against you. The tears now flowed freely down my cheeks. My own daughter-in-law, the mother of my supposed grandchildren, had been systematically poisoning me to steal my life. Mark knows nothing about this, Judith. He genuinely believes you are sick because Vanessa has shown him all this false evidence. She has manipulated him so skillfully that he is convinced he is protecting you by taking away your independence. That hurt even more, to know that my son wasn't evil, but a victim of the same woman who had destroyed me. Mark truly believed he was doing the right thing. But there's more you need to know, my love. Things that will change everything. More. How could there possibly be more after all this? Vanessa doesn't just plan to take your inheritance. She also plans to get rid of Mark once she has total control of the assets. My blood ran cold. Get rid of Mark? What did that mean exactly? I found evidence that Vanessa has researched our family's medical history, specifically the heart problems that affected my father and me. She knows Mark has a genetic predisposition to heart attacks. Joseph had died of a sudden heart attack. His father, too. Mark had inherited that predisposition, though he had been perfectly healthy until now. Vanessa has been buying medication that can induce cardiac problems if administered in the right doses. I found them hidden in her house during a visit. Vanessa was planning to kill Mark, too. The woman was a monster, worse than I could have ever imagined. Once Mark dies, naturally, from a heart attack, Vanessa will inherit everything as his widow, and the children will be completely under her control. She will have access to our entire fortune, with no one to question her. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. First, eliminate the inconvenient mother-in-law by declaring her incompetent, then get rid of the husband once he had served his purpose, and finally, keep all the money and the children as a perfect cover. Judith, if you are reading this, it means the first part of her plan has already succeeded. But I have good news for you. Good news? After everything I had just read, it seemed impossible that there could be anything good in this whole situation. The entire fortune Mark thinks he inherited are just properties and empty accounts I put in his name as a decoy. The real fortune, the $28 million, is in accounts and investments that only you now know about. 28 million? I thought our fortune was 18 million. Joseph had been hiding additional money. In this safe, you will find all the documents that prove Vanessa is a con artist and a potential murderer. You will also find the deeds to properties Mark doesn't know exist, bank accounts in tax havens, investments that generate $500,000 a month. My hands trembled as I searched the safe. Sure enough, there was a thick manila envelope full of documents, deeds to properties in different countries, bank statements showing amounts that made me dizzy, investment certificates in international companies. I have also left recordings of Vanessa confessing her plans, photographs of the medications she bought to kill me and to kill Mark, and a will that leaves everything, absolutely everything, in your name. I found the small recorder I had seen earlier. I turned it on with trembling hands and heard Vanessa's voice speaking to someone on the phone. Yes, we're almost done with the old woman. The hearing is next week. Once Mark has control of everything, we'll start phase 2. The medication you got me will work perfectly. A heart attack during the stress of managing his crazy mother's estate will look completely natural. The voice was unmistakably Vanessa's, cold and calculating, talking about my son's death as if she were planning a vacation. More recordings followed. Vanessa laughing as she described how she had been drugging me during family dinners. Vanessa talking to the corrupt doctor about which symptoms he should mention in his testimony. Vanessa planning how she would spend the millions once Mark was dead. The last document you'll find, my love, is a letter addressed to the FBI. I have compiled all the evidence against Vanessa for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. The letter is ready to be sent. It just needs your signature and the date. I found the letter. It was addressed to the FBI office in the state capitol, meticulously detailing all of Vanessa's crimes with attached evidence. I have also prepared a legal strategy to reverse the court's decision. I have contacts in the judicial system who owe me favors. With this evidence, you will not only regain your freedom and your assets, but Vanessa will go to prison for the rest of her life. My mind began to process everything slowly. Joseph had not only discovered Vanessa's plans, he had prepared a complete counteroffensive. He had protected our true fortune, gathered incriminating evidence, and given me all the tools necessary to destroy the woman who had destroyed my life. But there is something else, my love, something about the children you need to know. What else could there be about Leo and Sophie? Vanessa is not the twins' biological mother. I stopped completely. How could she not be their biological mother? I had been at the birth. I had seen my grandchildren being born. The twins are the children of Vanessa's younger sister, a 16-year-old girl who died in a car accident shortly after giving birth. Vanessa adopted the babies and passed them off as her own to get more sympathy from Mark and from us. I remembered when Vanessa arrived with the newborn babies. She had said the delivery was difficult, that she'd had complications. That's why she looked so haggard. But now I understood she was mourning her sister, not recovering from childbirth. Leo and Sophie's real grandparents live in another city. They are humble people whom Vanessa pushed away with lies, claiming they were dangerous drug addicts. They have been searching for their grandchildren for years. Did that mean there was another family that loved my grandchildren as much as I did? That Vanessa had not only stolen from me, but from them too? Judith, you hold in your hands the power to save Mark, to get the children back, and to get justice for all the harm Vanessa has caused. But you also have the opportunity for something greater, to reunite those children with their true family. The letter ended with a few lines that made me cry as I hadn't cried in years. My love, I know you feel betrayed and destroyed, but I want you to know that all of this has a reason. Vanessa chose the wrong family to swindle. She chose a strong, intelligent, and brave woman who will not give up without a fight. You now have everything you need to win this war. Use it wisely. I love you forever, Joseph. I sat in that kitchen for hours, reading and rereading every document, listening to every recording over and over. The magnitude of Vanessa's betrayal was overwhelming, but so was Joseph's meticulous preparation to protect me. My husband had been one step ahead the entire time. While Vanessa thought she was executing the perfect crime, Joseph had been documenting her every move, every lie, every diabolical plan. But what struck me most was the realization that Joseph had died knowing all of this. He had lived the last years of his life burdened with the knowledge that the woman we considered our daughter-in-law was planning to destroy our entire family. Why didn't you tell me when you were alive? I asked his photo that I carried in my wallet. We could have faced this together. But deep down, I knew the answer. Joseph knew me better than anyone. He knew I would have never believed something so terrible about Vanessa without overwhelming evidence. I would have tried to confront her, to talk to Mark, to resolve things amicably, and that would have given Vanessa the chance to change her plans, to erase the evidence, to disappear with the children. Now I understood why Joseph had been so insistent that we install security systems in the house, why he had started keeping copies of all important documents in different places, why he had insisted I learn to manage our finances independently. He knew that one day I would be facing this battle alone. I picked up the recorder and listened again to Vanessa's conversations. Her cold voice planning Mark's death filled me with a rage I didn't know I could feel. "Once the old fool dies from a heart attack," Vanessa said, laughing, "Mark will be so stressed managing the crazy lady's estate that it will be easy to trigger his cardiac problems. The doctors will say it was genetic, inevitable." In another recording, she talked about the children. "The twins are perfect for generating pity. Poor little orphans who need stability. No one will question me keeping all the money to take care of them. And when they come of age, well, accidents happen." She was planning to harm Leo and Sophie too? The woman's evil had no limits. But there was one recording that particularly caught my attention. Vanessa talking to someone about me. "The old woman is stronger than I thought. She keeps resisting the drugs better than most. But it doesn't matter. The damage is done. Mark is completely convinced she has Alzheimer's." "What if she recovers after the hearing?" the other voice asked. "She won't recover because she won't have the chance. Once she's committed to the facility, a little accident will solve the problem for good." Vanessa had planned to kill me too. Not just steal my house and take my grandchildren, but to eliminate me completely. I stood up from the chair with a determination I hadn't felt in months. Joseph was right. Vanessa had picked the wrong family to swindle. I reviewed all the financial documents Joseph had left. The amount of property and investments he had kept secret was incredible. We had houses in 3 different countries, stocks in multinational corporations, bank accounts generating interest in the millions. The mansion Mark had inherited was valued at $18 million, but it had a hidden $20 million mortgage that Joseph had secretly taken out. Technically, Mark had inherited a $2 million debt, not a fortune. The bank accounts he thought he controlled were empty. Joseph had transferred all the money to offshore accounts weeks before he died, leaving just enough to keep up appearances. The businesses Mark was now managing were empty shells. The real contracts, the major clients, the profitable investments, all were under corporate names that only I now knew. "Brilliant, Joseph," I murmured, smiling for the first time in months. "You gave them exactly what they deserved, problems and debts." But my smile faded when I thought of Mark. My son was being manipulated as much as I was. He truly believed he was taking care of his sick mother and managing a legitimate inheritance. He didn't know his wife was using him and planning to kill him. I picked up the cell phone I had bought the day before and dialed the first number on the list Joseph had left. Robert Sterling, an attorney specializing in financial fraud and reversing competency rulings. "Sterling Law Office," a secretary answered. "This is Judith Herrera. Joseph Herrera asked me to contact you if anything happened to him." There was a pause. Then, "Mrs. Herrera, we've been expecting your call for 2 years. Mr. Sterling will see you immediately. Can you come in today?" "I'll be there in 3 hours." I packed all the documents, the recordings, and the evidence into a suitcase. For the first time since the hearing, I got dressed with care. I put on my best black suit, the one Joseph said made me look powerful, put on makeup to cover the dark circles from crying, and styled my hair with an elegance I had lost during these terrible months. Looking at myself in the farmhouse mirror, I recognized the woman I had once been: strong, decisive, capable of facing any challenge. Vanessa had tried to destroy that woman, but she had not succeeded. The journey back to the city was completely different from the trip out. This time, I was not a defeated old woman fleeing her humiliation. I was a warrior with powerful weapons, preparing for the battle of her life. Mr. Sterling's office was on the 20th floor of a modern building in the financial district. The man who greeted me was older than me, with white hair and shrewd eyes that immediately reminded me of Joseph. "Mrs. Herrera," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Joseph was my best friend. He told me everything before he died and asked me to help you when the time came. You knew what was going to happen?" Joseph explained Vanessa's plans to me 2 years ago. "We have been preparing your defense ever since. All we need is your authorization to proceed." He showed me a legal strategy that he and Joseph had developed together. First, They would present evidence of fraud in the original hearing, proving the medical testimonies had been bought. Second, they would expose the drugs Vanessa had been administering, which would explain my episodes of confusion. Third, they would reveal that Mark had inherited only debt, not wealth. But that's not all, Mr. Sterling continued. We are also going to proceed criminally against Vanessa for attempted murder, fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy. Kidnapping? The twins are not legally hers. When she adopted her sister's children, she forged documents to pass as the biological mother. The real grandparents never consented to the adoption. He showed me documents Joseph had obtained. Leo and Sophie's real grandparents, David and Linda Miller, had been searching for their grandchildren for years. Vanessa had told them the children had died in the same accident as their daughter. They have a legal right to custody, the lawyer explained. And after everything they've suffered, they are willing to share custody with you if it means getting the children out of Vanessa's clutches. My heart filled with hope. I was not only going to get my grandchildren back, but I was going to meet another family who loved them as much as I did. When do we start? I asked. Right now. Joseph already had everything prepared. We just need your signature on these documents. I signed paper after paper the motion to reverse the competency ruling, the criminal complaint against Vanessa, the request for emergency custody of the children, the claim for all the assets that rightfully belonged to me. Mrs. Herrera, Mr. Sterling said when we were finished, "Are you prepared for what's about to happen? Vanessa is going to fight like a cornered animal when she realizes her plan has unraveled." I thought of Joseph, of his last words in the letter. "You have everything you need to win this war." "Mr. Sterling," I replied, in a voice I hadn't used in months, "Vanessa doesn't know who she's messing with." "Mr. Sterling," I replied, in a voice I hadn't used in months, "Vanessa doesn't know who she's messing with." The next day, the most satisfying operation of my life began. Mr. Sterling had coordinated everything like a perfect symphony. At 8 o'clock in the morning, FBI agents knocked on the door of my former home with an arrest warrant for Vanessa and a search warrant for the entire property. I was waiting in a car half a block away, along with David and Linda Miller, Leo and Sophie's real grandparents. We had talked all through the previous night, crying together for the lost years, for the grandchildren they thought were dead, for the pain Vanessa had caused so many families. "Mrs. Herrera," David had told me with tears in his eyes, "for 8 years, we have visited our grandchildren's grave every Sunday. Vanessa told us they had been burned in the accident, that there was nothing left to bury." Linda had added, her voice cracking, "We never stopped loving them. We never stopped looking for them. We knew in our hearts that something wasn't right." Now, sitting in that car, we watched justice being served. Vanessa came out of the house in a bathrobe, screaming like a maniac as the agents read her rights. Her shouts woke up the whole neighborhood. I could see the shocked faces of the neighbors who had testified against me, the same ones who had said I was a dangerous and unbalanced old woman. "This is a mistake," Vanessa shrieked as they handcuffed her. "I haven't done anything. The crazy one is the mother-in-law, not me." Mark ran out after her, completely confused, trying to understand what was happening. He was wearing only pajama pants and a t-shirt, his hair disheveled and the look of someone who had just woken up in a nightmare. "Agent, there's a mistake," my son yelled. "My wife hasn't committed any crime. The one who needs medical help is my mother." One of the FBI agents approached Mark with a manila envelope. "Sir, we need you to come with us to clarify a few things. Your wife is under arrest for fraud, attempted murder, document forgery, and kidnapping." Mark's face crumbled. "Kidnapping? Of whom?" "Of the children living in this house. It turns out they are not legally yours, nor your wife's." At that moment, Leo and Sophie appeared at the door, frightened by all the noise. My grandchildren, my babies, with terror on their little faces, not understanding why police were arresting the woman they believed was their mother. David and Linda got out of the car and ran. They didn't care that there were FBI agents, news cameras that had appeared out of nowhere, or curious neighbors recording everything on their phones. "Leo, Sophie," Linda cried, tears streaming down her face. The children froze when they saw these strangers running toward them. But then something magical happened. When David knelt in front of them and smiled with his kind eyes, Sophie tilted her head as if remembering something from long ago. "Grandpa Davy," the little girl whispered. "Yes, my love. I'm Grandpa Davy, and she's Grandma Linda. We've been looking for you for a very, very long time." Leo recognized them too. The children were only a few months old when Vanessa stole them, but the memory of true love is never completely erased. Mark was paralyzed, watching the scene. "I don't understand. Who are you? Why do the children know you?" Then I got out of the car. The moment Mark saw me, it was as if he had seen a ghost. His face went through shock, confusion, fear, and finally, something I hadn't seen in his eyes for years. "Shame, Mom," he whispered. "What's happening?" "What's happening, Mark, is that your wife is a criminal who deceived us all. And now she is going to pay for all the damage she has caused." Vanessa was still screaming as they put her in the police car. "Judith, you damn old woman. This is all your fault. You ruined my perfect plan." "My fault?" The woman was such a psychopath that even at her arrest, she was blaming me for her crimes. The agents began bringing evidence out of the house. They found the medications Vanessa had been buying to induce heart problems in Mark. They found the forged documents about the children. They even found a vial of the drugs she had been using to make me look demented during family dinners. "Mr. Mark," the lead agent said, "we need you to come to the station for a statement. You have also been a victim of your wife's crimes." My son looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Mom, is it true? Everything we said about you in court was a lie?" "Everything, Mark. Your wife was drugging me to make me seem sick. She bought false testimony from corrupt doctors. She planned everything for years to get our money. But I saw the evidence. I saw you confused, losing your memory. Because she was poisoning me. Every time I ate at your house, every time she served me coffee or dessert, she gave me drugs that made me act that way." Mark collapsed onto the front steps. The guilt, the shame, the realization of what he had done, it all hit him at once. "My God, Mom, what have I done? I took your house. I took you away from the children. I humiliated you in public. And all because of that woman." The children ran to me. "Grandma Judy! Grandma Judy!" they cried, hugging me with that pure strength that only children have when they feel true love. "My babies," I wept, holding them as if I would lose them again. "Grandma never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." "Vanessa told us you were very sick," Leo said. "That's why we couldn't see you." "She also said, you might die soon," Sophie added. "That's why we were so sad." Vanessa's cruelty knew no bounds. Not only had she kept me from my grandchildren, but she had psychologically tortured them by making them believe their grandmother was dying. Linda approached timidly. "Children, do you remember us? We're the parents of your real mommy, the one who's in heaven." Sophie nodded. "Mommy used to talk about you before the accident. She said you were the best grandparents in the world." David took out his wallet and showed them pictures of Vanessa's younger sister, the twins' real mother. "This is your mom when she was your age. See how much you look like her?" The children looked at the photos with fascination. They did indeed look so much like their biological mother. "Vanessa never let us see these," Leo whispered. "She said all the photos burned in the accident." Mark approached slowly, still in shock. "Mom, can you ever forgive me? I know what I did is unforgivable, but I really believed." "Mark," I interrupted, "you were a victim of Vanessa too. She manipulated all of us. But the important thing now is to fix things." Mr. Sterling arrived with more documents. "Mrs. Herrera, the judge has agreed to review the competency case with extreme urgency. With all the evidence we have, it will be overturned by the end of the week. And the house? The house legally never stopped being yours. Mark only had power of attorney based on fraudulent medical statements. Once the fraud is proven, you will automatically recover all your assets." Mark looked at me in surprise. "But what about the businesses I've been managing? The bank accounts?" Mr. Sterling smiled in a way that reminded me exactly of Joseph when he had made a clever business move. "Mr. Mark, I'm afraid your father was more astute than all of us. The businesses you've been managing were decoys. The accounts you thought you controlled were empty. Your father protected the real family fortune long before he died." Mark's face shifted from shock to understanding, and then to something like relief. "Dad knew what was going to happen," he murmured. That's why he was acting so strangely in the months before he died. It wasn't because of his heart. It was because he knew what Vanessa was planning. Your father loved you, Mark. But he loved me too. And he knew that if anything happened, I would need protection. In the distance, the police car with Vanessa was driving away, but I managed to hear her final screams. This isn't over. You'll all pay for this. Especially you, Judith. I turned to my son, to my grandchildren, to David and Linda, who were also victims of that woman's evil. Oh yes, I murmured, this is just beginning. Oh yes, I murmured, this is just beginning. The following days felt like living in a perfect revenge movie. Every one of Vanessa's lies unraveled. Every diabolical plan came to light. Every person she had deceived began to see the truth. The first devastating blow came when the FBI found the evidence Joseph had mentioned in his letter at the house. Hidden behind a false panel in the master bedroom was a complete file with photographs, documents, and even videos Vanessa had secretly taken of me during my drug-induced episodes of confusion. Look at this, Special Agent Garcia told me, showing me some photos. Your daughter-in-law meticulously documented every time you acted disoriented after she drugged you. But what she didn't know is that your husband had installed hidden security cameras that recorded everything. The recordings clearly showed Vanessa putting crushed pills in my coffee, mixing powders into my food, even applying creams to my hands that contained substances to make me tremble and appear ill. We also found her personal journal, the agent continued. She documented every step of her plan for 3 years. She called it Project Perfect Inheritance. The journal was chilling. Vanessa had calculated every last detail. How long it would take to convince Mark I was sick. Which doctors would be willing to provide false testimony for money. She had even timed how long it would take to kill me once I was committed. But the most shocking discovery was that I was not her first victim. Mrs. Herrera, Agent Garcia explained in his office. We've been investigating Vanessa's past and have found a pattern. She has done this before, several times. He showed me a thick file with photos of different families. Her first husband, Edward Salinas, died of a heart attack at 50, 3 months after changing his will to leave everything to Vanessa. Her second husband, Mark Hernandez, the twins' real father, also died suddenly of heart problems after discovering the child wasn't his. She killed them all. We are exhuming the bodies for autopsies. But based on the drugs we found at her house and the methods she planned to use on your son Mark, we believe so. Vanessa wasn't just a con artist. She was a serial killer who had perfected her method over years. Meanwhile, Mark was living his own hell of guilt and remorse. He had quit his job at the law firm. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The realization of what he had done to me was destroying him from the inside. Mom, he told me, crying, when I went to visit him at the hotel where he was staying, I don't know how to ask for forgiveness for something so terrible. I publicly humiliated you, took your house, kept you from the grandchildren you love so much. Mark, look at me, I said, taking his face in my hands as I did when he was a child. Vanessa is a professional manipulator. She fooled doctors, judges, an entire court. How were you supposed to realize what she was capable of? But I should have trusted you more. I should have investigated before taking you to court. I should have. You should have married a different woman, I interrupted. But we can't change that now. What we can change is the future. I told him about the true fortune Joseph had protected, about the properties and investments that even Mark didn't know existed. His face went from shock to disbelief. Dad had $28 million hidden? Your father was smarter than any of us imagined. He not only protected our money, he protected us. But the real catharsis came when the judge officially overturned the competency ruling. The hearing was a public spectacle. The same reporters who had covered my original humiliation now filled the room to see my vindication. The doctors who had testified against me were arrested for perjury and bribery. The neighbors who had given false testimony were subpoenaed as witnesses for the prosecution against Vanessa. This court, the judge declared in a solemn voice, has thoroughly reviewed the case of Mrs. Judith Herrera and has found overwhelming evidence that she was the victim of the most elaborate and cruel fraud I have seen in 30 years on the bench. The gavel fell, but this time in my favor. The ruling of mental incompetency is completely nullified. All assets are restored to Mrs. Herrera, and a full criminal investigation is ordered against all participants in this fraud. The courtroom erupted in applause. Mark wept by my side, squeezing my hand as if asking for forgiveness. Leo and Sophie, who now knew the whole truth, hugged me tightly. But the sweetest moment came when I returned to my mansion. Mark had hired a cleaning company to erase all traces of Vanessa's presence. The decorators she had called were immediately fired. Every change she had made to my home was reversed. "I want the house to be exactly as you had it, Mom," Mark told me as he supervised the work. "I want to erase every last vestige of that woman from our lives." The children were ecstatic to have their real grandmother back. They ran through the house showing me everything Vanessa had changed, everything they had missed during these terrible months. "Grandma Judy," Sophie told me, "you're not going to live in that ugly house in the country anymore." "No, my love. Grandma is home for good." David and Linda had decided to move to the city to be close to their grandchildren. I gave them one of the properties Joseph had bought years ago, a beautiful house just 10 minutes from mine. "Mrs. Herrera," David told me with tears in his eyes, "we don't know how to thank you for giving us back our grandchildren." "David, those children have enough love in their hearts for 4 grandparents. We'll raise them together, as it should be." The first family dinner at my house in months was magical. Mark had brought flowers. The children had made drawings to decorate the table. David had cooked his late daughter's favorite dish, and Linda had brought photos of the twins' real mother. "A toast," I said, raising my wine glass. "To Joseph, who protected us even after his death, and to true family, which always finds its way back, no matter how much time passes." But amidst all this recovered happiness, I knew the final chapter was missing. Vanessa had been arrested, but her trial was just beginning. The media was following the case obsessively. It had become the biggest scandal of the year. The daughter-in-law who tried to murder an entire family for money. "Are you going to the trial, Mom?" Mark asked me. "Not only am I going, Mark, I'm going to testify. That woman is going to hear from my own mouth what it feels like to be betrayed by someone you trust." The day I received the subpoena to testify against Vanessa, I smiled in a way I hadn't smiled in months. It was the smile of a woman who had lost everything and gotten it back, multiplied. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated by the wrong person. "Vanessa," I murmured, looking at the summons. "Now you're going to meet the real Judith." The children were playing in the garden. Mark was helping with the dishes in the kitchen. David and Linda were telling stories about their daughter in the living room. My house was full of life, of love, of the true family Vanessa had tried to destroy. But there was something else Joseph had left in that safe that I hadn't used yet. Something that would make Vanessa's fall even more spectacular than she could ever imagine. And I was waiting for the perfect moment to use it. The day of Vanessa's trial arrived like the dawn, after the longest storm of my life. I woke up early, dressed in my most elegant suit, the same kind I wore when Joseph and I went to the most important business meetings. Today, I wasn't just Judith, the grandmother who had gotten her family back. Today, I was the woman who was going to close the most painful chapter of her life forever. Mark accompanied me to the courthouse. Neither of us spoke much on the way. He knew this day was crucial for my complete healing, and I knew he needed to see Vanessa punished as much as I did. The courtroom was packed. The media had turned the case into a circus. "The Black Widow who deceived an entire family," the headlines read. "The $1 million fraud that shocked the nation," the TV news reported. When Vanessa entered in handcuffs, I was struck by her transformation. The elegant, manipulative woman I had known was gone. Her hair was unkempt, her face was haggard, and her eyes had the desperate look of someone who knows their world is crumbling. But when she saw me in the gallery, something in her gaze changed. For a second, I saw a flash of that cold cruelty she had hidden so well for years. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "the state will present overwhelming evidence that the defendant, Vanessa Miller, perpetrated one of the most elaborate and cruel frauds in the history of our judicial system." Over the next few hours, I listened as all of Vanessa's crimes were laid bare. The medications she had bought to kill me and Mark, the forged documents about the children, the purchased medical testimonies, the recordings where she planned our deaths, as if it were a shopping list. When it was my turn to testify, I stood with all the dignity Joseph had taught me during 40 years of marriage. Mrs. Herrera, the prosecutor said, "Can you describe to the court how you felt when you discovered that the woman you considered your daughter-in-law had been systematically poisoning you?" "Your Honor," I replied, looking directly at Vanessa, "I felt as if I had been living with a venomous snake for years without realizing it. But I also felt proud that my husband had been smarter than she was." Vanessa glared at me, but I continued. "This woman not only tried to steal my money and my house, she tried to steal my grandchildren, my dignity, my sanity, and finally, my life. But what hurts me the most is that she was willing to kill my son, a man who sincerely loved her, just for greed. What would you say to the defendant if you could speak to her directly?" The judge gave me permission to address Vanessa. I stood from my seat and walked toward her. Her eyes followed me with a mixture of hatred and fear. "Vanessa," I said, my voice clear and strong, "did you think you had chosen the perfect family to swindle? An elderly widow, a trusting son, helpless children. Did you think we were easy victims?" She tried to interrupt me, but the judge silenced her. "But you made a fatal mistake. You underestimated the power of true love. Joseph loved me so much that he protected me even after his death. Mark loves me so much that he is destroyed by the guilt of having believed you. And those children you tried to take from me love me so much that they never stopped asking for their grandma." Tears began to roll down Vanessa's cheeks, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage at having been discovered. "And now," I continued, pulling the last document Joseph had left in the safe from my bag, "I want you to hear this." I handed the paper to the prosecutor. It was a full confession that Joseph had secretly recorded from Vanessa, where she admitted to killing her previous husbands and detailed exactly how she planned to kill Mark and me. When the recording began to play in the courtroom, Vanessa completely collapsed. Her cold, calculating voice filled the room. "The idiots never suspect a thing when they die of heart attacks. It's the perfect crime. And when Mark dies, I'll have almost 30 million and 2 kids to make everyone feel sorry for me for the rest of my life." The room erupted in horrified murmurs. Even the judge seemed shocked by the coldness of her words. "That recording is illegal," Vanessa shouted. "Joseph Herrera had no right to record me without my consent." "Ma'am," the judge replied in a stern voice, "when you were on private property planning murders, you forfeited any expectation of privacy." Vanessa's defense attorney, who had been fighting an impossible battle from the start, finally gave up. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change her plea to guilty on all charges." But Vanessa jumped up furiously. "No, I'm not pleading guilty to anything. That family owes me everything. Mark was a loser before he met me. The children were orphans nobody wanted, and the old woman was just wasting a fortune." Her words sealed her fate. At that moment, the entire courtroom could see Vanessa's true psychopathic nature. There was no repentance, no remorse, only rage at being caught. The judge didn't need to deliberate for long. "Vanessa Miller, this court finds you guilty of aggravated fraud, first-degree attempted murder, forgery, kidnapping, and criminal conspiracy. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell with a sound that was like music to my ears. Vanessa was dragged from the courtroom, screaming threats. "This isn't over. You'll all pay. Especially you, Judith." But her screams faded into the distance as I stood there, victorious, surrounded by my true family. Mark hugged me, crying, "Mom, I can never forgive myself for putting you in danger." "Mark," I whispered in his ear, "you didn't put me in danger. You saved me. If you hadn't married her, if we hadn't lived through all this, we would have never discovered that Joseph had left us an even greater fortune. We would have never met David and Linda, and we would have never learned to truly value what we have." The following months were a time of total reconstruction. Mark went back to practicing law, but now he specialized in helping victims of family fraud. David and Linda became the grandparents the twins had lost, and I became a stronger woman than I had ever been. With the full fortune Joseph had left me, I established a foundation to help elderly victims of family abuse. The Joseph Herrera Foundation, I called it, so that no family will ever again be destroyed by greed. Leo and Sophie grew up surrounded by true love, knowing the story of their biological mother, proud to have 4 grandparents who adored them, and understanding that real love has nothing to do with blood, but with the heart. One afternoon, 5 years after the trial, I was in my garden watching the grandchildren play when Mark approached with a smile. "Mom, do you know what day it is today? The anniversary of something good, I hope." It's exactly 5 years since Vanessa was sentenced to life in prison. I was silent for a moment, thinking about all we had been through. "You know what, Mark? I had almost forgotten. That woman is no longer a part of our lives." And it was true. Vanessa had become a shadow of the past, while we had built a future full of light. That night, before going to sleep, I picked up the photo of Joseph that I always keep on my bedside table. "Thank you, my love," I whispered. "Thank you for protecting me, for teaching me that true love transcends even death, and for reminding me to never underestimate my own strength. Never underestimate the silence of a humiliated woman, because one day she may rise up stronger than anyone ever imagined. And when that happens, the entire universe conspires to bring about justice."